This is, you probably heard some other talks. I just heard a couple of good talks in this very room about digital transformation. So what I'm talking about today is very much in line with things that we're all having to deal with as architects and in our various roles in digital transformation. So I'd say the big thesis is that to effectively do digital transformation, it's going to change how we look at our jobs, some of our practices, some of our values. And so that's kind of what I'm going to be bringing out, kind of how to be effective doing that. And we'll hear about some companies that have made that change effectively and maybe what we can learn from them along the way. All right, so first off, I'll kind of cover some of the territory about APIs and why they're important and why they're about innovating and or disrupting your industry. Some true tales of API innovation, tales on the campfire. Very good stories about how that's helped companies, and then how a change culture interacts with API innovation, and then finally also deliver with sound architecture, which is why we're all here today. All right, so first let me lay some of the ground on digital transformation as well. So for one thing, we all know we're in the world of digital transformation as consumers. And we see some important changes being made. So the example is Starbucks coffee in this example, and the fact of going from a completely one experience to another based on new flows of information, enabled ultimately you'll see by APIs. And the fact of how you can change a customer experience, which was waiting in line, having to delay your day, go through different hoops. But now it's as easy as connecting to an app that knows you, knows what you like, knows you as a customer, lets you pick your location, it's right there waiting for you. It's a completely different experience, and that's driven by APIs. So really everybody, most organizations are looking at this. So the big circle there is the 88% that say this is a big deal for them right now. And then so don't call along soon enough. I was trying to and there's a lot of benefits to a digital transformation. So everything from new customers to new markets, right? And I'm going to actually show you some examples of market makers, right? Someone who has gone into an industry and completely transformed the market. We all have the examples in our minds, things like Uber and Airbnb and some of these sort of sharing economy type things. But there are other examples as well that I'd like to talk about. From an architecture perspective, what's driving this change is APIs. And I'll go into some of these other layers that are important as architects, but obviously very, inexactly named as the middle tier. Lots of detail in that box to effectively make that work. And that's what I cover some in the last chart. But the key thing is it draws on a lot of great work that's happened in architecture before, right? We've all lived through service-oriented architecture and the promise that it's going to change the world, right? Now, I'm not going to stand in front of you and say, but really APIs are going to change the world. That's not what I'm here for. But I think that we are always making some progress, even when we go and repeat some of the promises of the past. The great thing about SOA is it made integration easier for an organization to do in a lot of ways, and it brought a different mindset to delivering applications and integrations and new experiences. And I think the new experiences part of it is where APIs will really shine. Just in terms of the simplicity, the openness of delivering APIs allows you to not only have new internal projects that work better, but open it up to your partners and to your customers and to any developer on the internet. So that's a really intriguing possibility. And some of these that I'll show you are actually doing that as well. So typically the discussion about digital transformation is about disruption. And I don't really like to think about this all the time, but it is something to have kind of a look in the review, but not always to just always be looking around your shoulder. What you really want to do is you want to think about the potential disruptors in your space. You want to be aware of your market, who you are as a company, but also what the opportunity is. And I think as we go into some of the case studies, you'll see people that found an opportunity and were able to capitalize on it effectively, right? And that's really what we really want to do. So think about some changes in the banking industry. And think about being a bank nowadays, in the banking business, and the kind of competitors that you have, or the kind of new entrants to your market, and their effect on your business. So things like Tesco, which is a grocery store, and does things like deposits, right, for their customers, right? New banks completely on the internet, so able to compete effectively in the digital space, which is where the new battles are being fought, especially with new customers. Device makers like Apple with Apple Pay and Samsung, and even specialty retailers like Starbucks with kind of their own currency and payment system that's sort of bypassing your payment methods. Very interesting landscape. So here's some details on some of those, or one of those examples, where Starbucks went digital, and now they have a 1.6 billion payments business that drives 21% of their transactions through their Starbucks card and through their app infrastructure. And then some other ones that are very interesting, like Peugeot. Peugeot actually implements a connected car via APIs, and they can actually sell that data about their cars and the vehicle data to partners. And you'll see a common theme that is actually creating a very unique, valuable network. The value really is in the network that you're creating through your APIs. And finally, Citi is a terrific example of a 200-year-old company that got a new lease on life by opening up, right? And taking an API approach that says, we have a need for innovation because of all these new entrants to the marketplace. And basically running kind of a world-class reference book example of how to run a hackathon that spurred a number of great ideas. Okay, and all of this was driven, I forgot the water. Does anyone have a water bottle? Thank you. And all of these were driven by APIs, and we'll show that. So hopefully I'm getting you excited about where some of this change is coming from. Right, and the other side of this is the customer expectation and the opportunities from all this world of connected devices. And those devices need a common API experience. In fact, the 2.2 trillion number says what API economy, use that overused term, will be worth in 2020, I think it is. So a lot of opportunity here. And over time, it becomes more and more of a challenge to deliver a common experience to all of these different methods. So APIs are a great way to deliver to that challenge. So, sure.
So I don't miss the crux of it. First of all, I want to crux, what is the deal with APIs? I mean, as a developer and a programmer, we use APIs all along. And it seems like now you're elevating APIs at the business level that they don't understand it. The only examples you've cited, I still don't see the connection between APIs. Why are APIs front and center? The only thing I can accept is, okay, it opens it up to partners and fellow developers. But
this is a good question.
Yeah.
So APIs, and this is essential backstory for a lot of people who have heard of or worked with APIs before, as developers, right? We've coded the APIs, but really this is sort of taking the idea of APIs and raising it up a level so that it's not just, coders necessarily, but it's sort of making an API that even a non-developer could use. So it's basically just presenting your data or what your company does for a living out to an open specification. So it's the openness, it's the consumability of the API that's kind of different, right? And being able to put it out in a coordinated way to an audience and sort of attracting that audience. So APIs themselves, not new, but the ability to sort of put corporate effort and intensity behind it to open it up, to put out and create a community around it is really what this is about. That's a good question. Thank you. Please, any question like that, please keep me coming. That's very good. I meant to bring that up. Okay, so here's where sort of the value chain of APIs starts. So, and this sort of gets to this question. So companies have a lot of obviously valuable business assets. Everything from, and mainly it's the products and services that are being delivered to customers. It's the people in the organization, and increasingly it's the data. And you can represent what a company provides in terms of an API. So it's just a specification that says, here are the things that this business can do. You represent it to the outside world. So increasingly, what you're able to do is an API is a digital form of an organization's capabilities. So once you can expose those APIs, there's sort of an internal side of this and an external side of this. The internal side of this makes you more effective as a company, in terms of things like mobile programs and integration programs and those sorts of things. But when you start to actually open it up to the outside, then you've got all these possibilities for new partnerships and new outside developer programs and innovation around what your company can do. Now suddenly it's not just your company, but you're connected to all these other valuable pieces of a new network that you just created. And that's kind of the idea of what we're doing here. Now, how do we get into this? And let's talk about that network and a few examples. So one company that we've had experience with is Cars.com. And I'll talk to you about Zillow.com in a minute, especially in a sort of market-making point of view. To create the Cars.com mobile app and the web experience for them. It basically has a network of APIs that make that experience work. It's sort of making that business possible. It's using those capabilities from their partners, whether it's IBM, insurance companies, bank APIs, dealers, map providers. And those are all sort of powering what the Cars.com experience is able to do. And really what that does is it makes, obviously, those partners, it sort of solidifies that partnership and it builds this sort of broader value-added network to what Cars.com can do. And then on the other side, it really creates a new ecosystem of partners that are able to join into this new network that you've created. And you're sort of creating a great amount of new value over time by doing this. Just as an example, I'll go into that with Zillow. They're really changing the real estate business, right? It really used to be more driven around real estate agents, them driving the experience, them knowing what's available to you. They were sort of the middleman for that space. So as you'll see in a minute, what Zillow did is figure out which partners, and sort of disintermediate the situation so that the realtors and the lenders are actually part of their network. And so by creating this new network that's more consumer driven, they've sort of taken some of the primary players in that industry and made them into players in an API ecosystem. So it's very interesting. And it can change the marketplace. And I've got a few more details on that in a moment. So it can change the experience for the customer in terms of what kind of experiences that you will be able to achieve. So obviously from a consumer point of view, it meets the digital transformation imperative that you have a common experience of a company on whatever device that you might happen to be on. So that's across the web, across different devices. And in terms of, so that's the sort of the consumer perspective. From a business perspective, you also have unique business-to-business API opportunities. So as an example of this, Best Buy opens up their entire catalog so that it's not just you have to go through the Best Buy website directly, you can actually, they expose their data, their catalog to partners, and then they are sort of broadening their reach across and showing all of their inventory, all of their sale information through an open API. And a lot of this is happening also in the financial industry as well, where, and as you'll see with Citi, they're opening their API so that new forms of business can use their data and their transaction methods to create new banking experiences. So just a couple of examples there. So as you get into the business of an API program, you look for opportunities for what type of program you want to run. Sometimes it's using free APIs, and I'll show you an example of Edmunds doing this, and why that was effective for them. Sometimes developers pay for it or get paid to use those. The developers in the room are familiar with these types of examples. And then sometimes it's just about indirect. I'd say, like in eBay trading APIs, even the Best Buy APIs, sort of broadening your reach to lots of different new outlets. So you kind of have to look at which of these, API businesses are right for the organization that you're in. And this example shows the public API and private API use. Well, I'm primarily talking about public API programs here. There's a lot of opportunity in private APIs as well, so don't want to downplay it, but it's not the theme of what I'm talking about here. Just as an example, Evernote's API program, they estimated that it was 99 to 1 in terms of internal API traffic to external. So it all depends on what your organization might need. You might need more internal API stuff, or the public API initiative might be more in line with what your business needs to do. So the API journey can often look like this through several stages, starting with things like using third-party services to extend what you do in your organization. And your internal developers might use those to begin with. It can progress to extending your enterprise data into private APIs, and that helps you with integration projects that you have in your organization. You can extend that into partner APIs that you do through B2B partnerships that are able to help integrate with your vendors and partners. And then finally, you may choose to, like you said, go to a public developer program. So let's go to some examples of where this has happened. Let's talk about Zillow. Zillow is a very interesting example because so a lot of times people just see what comes out, let's say, into an app store, right? Or just see sort of the end result. But it's made Zillow possible, and Zillow essentially is a company that allows you to do a lot of the traditional real estate things yourself as a consumer. You want to be able to research your home. You want to be able to research areas. You want to do interactions with lenders. You even want to do home improvement stuff. Well, all of that has been made possible by an API program that Zillow implemented. And then it's able to sort of grow the business as well as put their arms around the network that is part of the Zillow network, right? So there's these interesting networks that you may see possible in the industry that you're in. In this case, the way that they make their business is charging real estate agents and lenders to use this suddenly very valuable network that they've created through APIs. So you can actually go to Zillow, join their API program, and suddenly you're able to put that on your website or integrate that with some product offering that you're working on. Where their business seems to be going also, they've expanded into things like rentals. They've expanded into interior design and tying new partners like Sherwin-Williams. So as you go to put together an API program, you need to look at the right level of exposure of your APIs out to the public, right? So in this case, they have a certain level of control. It's not wide open. They say request API access, and you sort of develop a business partner relationship with them, and then you're sort of joining their network. And I have some other examples where it's more sort of free form for different reasons, right? And more wide open. My next example is Citibank. You see that the bank part is missing, right? Because the city wants to be more than just a bank. So their challenge was, how does a 200-year-old company reinvent itself? And I didn't actually realize it was more than 200 years old. So this is from their marketing officer. They said, our biggest fear is that a bank is where the money sits. That's it. Where I put my money. As opposed to actually being engaged with the customer. And that statement was made during a hackathon that they did in 2014. What they did is they wanted to, essentially they knew that they needed to innovate their business model. And the way that they did that is to essentially create a set of APIs that could be put into a hackathon, right? Really a huge, a very popular hackathon, and I linked to that in the resources. And in many ways, it had a transformative effect on the city organization. Because what happened was the employees first realized that they were serious about transforming the business. They created many great new ideas and services that they wanted to bring to market. They acquired some great external talent by opening up the organization to new developer talent that would develop in this hackathon challenge called the City Mobile Challenge. And it also gained some visibility for internal motivators. So essentially, it changed the company. I have some screenshots of what came out of this. Things like City Bike, Apple Watch type stuff. And as you see here down on the bottom, what they were doing was they were exposing their key functions and data by an API, right? I know I said API like 85 times, but it's very important. Down at the bottom, you see where that occurred and that kind of what that looked like. So a developer would go into this mobile challenge and have all this available to them and then say, go innovate something, try something new, right? So you can do that for external developers. You can also bring that innovation into your organization. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Any questions? So this kind of gives you a few more results of what came out of the Citibank Mobile Challenge. Here we saw how they integrate with partners and sort of a rewards program, all made possible, actually usually in a few days, right? So it's really gives you sort of a new speed of change if you sort of have a well-managed API program like this with certain innovation events that allow you to rapidly ideate, create some new ideas, and it can inject new life into what you're doing. Okay, so from an IBM perspective, we developed some pretty revolutionary technology ourselves. But we knew that this wasn't, this needed to be something that a lot of people could use and enhance their own applications. So as many of you may know, Watson built a supercomputer that beat a human competitor in Jeopardy, on Jeopardy in 2011. And what we did is we took the capabilities of that supercomputer system and we decomposed that into APIs because we knew that broadly speaking, applications, websites, new solutions that are being built by customers and whatever developers on the internet could be built by using cognitive capabilities from Watson. And that's what we published out on our Bluemix product. From a Bluemix perspective, there's a lot more things in Bluemix led by World of Watson, led by Watson type of functionality and also other services. The idea of Bluemix is that you can go and innovate and create new solutions quickly, and it's all API driven. I think my last example is Edmunds.com. Very interesting story. As a company, they started as sort of a publisher of automobile information and reviews. And over time, they realized they went through various transformations, the CD-ROM era, the web era. Today, they're a leading API provider of automotive information. And the way that they have strategically, gone to the top today is as an API provider. And there's a lot of great things about their culture that is kind of documented where they are. So some things about their culture that are interesting, their internal internship programs, their ability to sit down with senior leaders in a casual fashion and share ideas, regular sessions with industry thought leaders, and then sort of like their hack programs and their accelerator programs. They're all sort of driven by an API approach. And this is what I was mentioning a second ago, is that the Edmunds API sort of, it links itself to whatever developer has an idea, and it's free. So the way that they are making their business work is they're involving all of these innovative developers and charging things like automotive companies and dealerships, etc. So again, they're creating that valuable network around their organization that other people find absolutely critical to be used. So in terms of getting started and sort of taking it to the next level, it's really important to look at how you innovate in your culture, in your organization. So as Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So the point of this is to say, let's say you buy into the fact that, yes, an API program sounds great. I would like to be able to change and build new products and services in my organization. Sounds like a good idea. What's the problem with that? Sometimes organizations are not ready for change, right? Oftentimes we've got either a sort of conservative mindset, lots of reasons why change may not occur. So what do you do to get to a change culture so that you could start down an API innovation path? So I'd say first things that you need to do is take, how are we doing on time? Okay, good, we're doing good. So the first thing I would say, if I was to advise a company on joining the API economy, is to take a frank self-assessment. A lot of companies are not really in the business of change. They don't believe that their market is changing, and a lot of companies are complacent. So I think the good first step for companies is to know that change is going to be endemic, right? It's going to be constant from here on. And really that's what has overtaken some businesses in the digital transformation space, because it's possible to be out-innovative. So the next one would be to get an outside-in perspective on your company. It's important to not always be talking internally to yourself to evaluate yourself. Actually have other companies look at how you're working and get some frank input on that. And then from that, look at what your strengths and weaknesses are as a company and see what that matches to the corporate environment. The example that I see here, or that I've heard before, is Nokia, who was a great company. They were able to transform themselves many times. They actually made rubber boots at one point. And they made these different changes to different types of products over time. But what really overtook them was the smartphone era. They had actually taken and sold off a lot of their diverse businesses that they'd been in, and they were a great manufacturer, but they were very poor in design and user experience, right? Ultimately, they didn't see where the market was going, and were not getting the right input to go to where they needed to be. So those things could happen to any company. Open up communication and feedback channels in your company. And consider, I actually found there's some various tools to help you change your culture from one that's sort of reticent to change, and find what those blockers are within your corporate culture and remove them, sort of through an examination of your own practices. So one of those tools is called the culture map. And then I'd also say to find the time during this this exercise to ask disruptive questions within the organization. If we hosted a forum called "How Our Products and Services Suck," what topics would be on the main stage? Really ask yourself the hard questions. How can our services be turned into physical products? How can our products be turned into a service? What can we offer for free that no one else does? How can we be disruptive? And actually, there's a number of other disruptive ideas in this book called "Kill the Company" that I really like to refer to. So ask yourself some of those tough questions. So, and the reason I bring this up is to sort of get us to the next step, right? So, as architects, you're important as change agents within the company, right? You are the bridge between strategy and IT, right? So, so to be a part of that change in the culture, so that you can actually get to where we want to go, which is innovation. Here are the practices that I see as crucial for doing innovation on an API culture strategy. So first off, I'd say it's critical to lead with user-centered design. We don't always think about the end user experience, but more and more, especially in the digital transformation age, you have to look at what your end users are experiencing from your products or services. Whether that's your customers, your partners, or in the case of an API, your developer community. Critically important. Actually, we've got IBM design right up front that can go into some depth on that. Disruptive businesses are leading with that excellent customer experience. We see there with Starbucks. Plan those regular innovation events, whether they're hackathons, brainstorming sessions, leadership meetings, innovation jams. And not just plan them, but actually commit to doing something with that, right? Because when you do that, you're providing your employees a voice, you're getting that best information from your organization, and those will actually go somewhere and make some change in the organization. Take care of your community. Take care of and value all your users. Make sure your collaboration channels are clear and effective with who you're partnering with in the community, and really give them a real voice in your product direction. And always be looking for new users, new organizations to add to that network, right? Because APIs are about building that new network and finding out who can get new value out of the network that you're setting up. Finally, get a regular outside perspective. To run a change-driven organization, you have to constantly hear things you don't want to hear. And some things you do. You want to hear from customers that are not your customers anymore, from consultants, and even from your own critics. Finally, how to deliver APIs with a sound architecture. So once you've actually gone to a change culture, once you started to adopt change practices, and innovation practices, how do you define an API strategy? So a few things, and then we'll open it up to questions. You need to primarily look at at least these four main sets of stakeholders as you set up your API program. The developers who will actually be using the APIs, the product manager that actually creates this API as an offering, as a new product of your company. The developer that needs to assemble the APIs, manage security, scale, and then the operations lead is going to actually have to be delivery and management of these and operations over time. So these are all your key stakeholders. From a strategy perspective, there's multiple parts. So everything from get to application development with the library of APIs, securely expose them from your backend systems so that they're accessible and secure from all of your different touch points. Publish them so that your developers and partners can use them, and also figure out how the business is going to work and what monetization model and analytics will come out of that. is my last slide. This one is about what goes into an architecture for an API strategy. So, you know, it sort of starts, I guess, from the bottom up. You know, these are the actual things. They can be data, processes, applications. Even in a sense, they can be your own people that, you know, that are represented by APIs. In fact, Edmunds has an API that represents sort of their expertise of actual real people, you know, presenting research. So these can be all those things that you're exposing. So make it easy to design an effective API, right? One that is consumable by people needing to use it from the outside. Security, analytics, lifecycle management, and then as you go up, you know, as you move this forward, you need a way to socialize it to your communities, internal and external. And then as you go up, plan for different ways how it will actually be used by the channels that will access them, and how to manage and sort of drive analytics back into the process to continually create new intelligence about those APIs over time. So that. I do have some resources for further investigation. So I've got some resources on developing that culture of innovation, some of these case studies, as well as you know, some more API economy information that I'll share when we post these presentation slides. And I will open it up to questions.
So what's the most pressing problem for all the companies out there to build APIs? Security is one for sure. You have to, I think some of the Google or Uber exposing these APIs one thing, and all the banks out there, where the stakes are much higher.
Oh yeah.
So what's the approach?
Yeah, actually that's very true. When you're exposing your APIs, you have to think about security of the information. You have to think about making sure you know who is actually using those APIs and what sort of rights they need. You have to do everything from scaling and sort of managing and forecasting the usage. So all of those are sort of the big challenges. You definitely want, you know, depending on what kind of API, you need to really be good at marketing it, and the community building, believe it or not, can be pretty challenging as well. So depending on how you're creating the community, that's a big job as well. Any other questions? All right. Anyone else have a question after? Come on up, and thank you for coming.